Hey, Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, what's up, man?
Hey, loved your post just last week, and I want to circle back to that. Let's unpack it a little bit. You brought up this idea of buffering systems, and
Yep.
as a process guy, you think about this more deeply and probably more frequently than most. But when in the world of process, yeah, we keep stock on hand, or we create
Yeah.
some interesting redundancies. But I love that you called out this question around what's that look like for knowledge workers? What do we do
Yeah.
from buffering system when all of our products are between our ears? So,
Yeah.
your point that you made was that this is trust, but I'd love for you to kind of take
Yeah.
me through, how did you come to this? What made you think
Yeah.
buffering system for knowledge workers?
Yeah.
I don't know,
So it's
Post-it notes or what's going
yeah,
on?
it's interesting. So I've been thinking a lot uh about how do you see it? Right. So, like
Mm,
what is it, Sixth Sense movie from, that most kids probably have never
yeah,
seen,
I
which
see.
is, I see dead people. They're everywhere, right? Well, I've done that in Excel because I have, Excel. I hate Excel for as much, views as I have on YouTube, which I think
You
is getting
you hate
close to 3
on
million.
most is what I've
I do. Well,
like
it's
3,000,000.
really fascinating. Yeah, I've got 3 million views on advanced Excel and I hate it. Like, and it's not that I don't hate it. It just gets misused and that's what bugs me. But
I agree. Yeah.
anyway, so back in going to the Excel piece is like what I would tell people is like if you are cutting and pasting and you're
Mm,
doing the same thing over and over again, come talk to me because I will automate it. I'll fix it. Right. And
yeah.
literally there were probably, you know, more than 2 handfuls of times in which it
Mm.
took me less to code it than it did for them to do the manual process. And so I've been so we kick off this
Yeah,
process debt podcast. This is number
right.
10. We now have a top 10 and a bottom 10. Super excited about that.
I like
And I've been thinking about for probably the last month or so, what is the one thing that I can point to that says, if you
mhm,
see this, you will see process debt, where you go back to the sixth sense, where it's like, I see dead people. It's everywhere,
mm,
right? Where, like, what's that one thing where I see process debt? It's everywhere.
that's right.
And so I've been reading a book on the Toyota production system. I think it's, I'm 50 books in this year on Audible, which is, bad problem that I have.
Nice.
And
And
it
weekly counter.
I
Nice.
know. I know. I forget the exact count, but I do track that. But
Awesome.
Toyota's thing is they historically have they if you go to Ford, like Ford would basically they do mass manufacture. And so you create a piece and then you create a buffer and some buffer stock and that safety stock so that if something goes down or there's inefficiencies,
Yeah.
there's a problem, right? And so Say Toyota's completely different, and they're completely different because they were totally strapped for cash coming out of
Mhm.
World War II,
Yeah.
and they looked at productions different because they had to. And so what they did is they started thinking through the system as one at a time.
Mm.
So single part at a time. So if in the manufacturing world, it's just in time and it's lean manufacturing and it's all these things. And so
Right.
then my mind starts spinning about, well, okay, this is great. Good job, Chris. This is perfect for manufacturing. But as a knowledge worker, where does that what in the how do you translate that?
Yeah. What's the
And
one
then I
the time here? Yeah.
yeah, so it was like, what's the one thing of time? And Toyota is really about the value flow, like the flow of value. And they think of their business almost like a grocery store, where a grocery store is essentially a distribution warehouse
Yeah.
in which it's a pull system. So someone goes and buys something, and then someone goes to the back and replaces that. So that's how they think about that.
Yeah.
Well, how does that work for knowledge workers? Well, I, noodled on it a little bit, and I was thinking that buffer system,
Mm.
that buffering system in corporations is really about trust.
Mhm.
And that's magical and it's wonderful. And I think it's also terrible. And what I mean by that is, you and I, we've known each other for decades.
Yeah.
So we have high trust, which is awesome, right?
Right. Right.
But we could join a project together
Mm.
and you and I would have high trust with each other because of our history, but I could also be lying to you,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And so if you take away that trust,
Mm.
if there's no process underneath it, what
Yeah.
do you have?
Yeah. You know, this is super interesting, Chris, because as I first started to read through your post, and particularly the mention of Toyota, I started thinking about the things that are we oftentimes associate with Deming, and so this like
Yeah.
bonds and that
Yeah.
pull system, but the notion that I place it in queue for you to pull, the queuing isn't enough. That just gives it a predictable place, but
Yeah.
it confidence that you are going to reach for the next unit.
Yeah.
Handoff will be completed. And so,
Yeah.
you know, anytime there's human intervention, even in manufacturing, there is this inherent assumption. And so makes me think that knowledge workers, though, maybe there's more facets to that trust or the confidence we place in collaborators that's different than what we see in manufacturing.
I think it's because your work is unseen.
You can't
Eh,
physically see a half a
correct.
car.
Yeah. You can't physically see the report that you're supposed to deliver, right?
Yeah.
No, and I also think, I think most of the time businesses don't think through what value is being added here at every level. And I mean, you're new to the
Oh,
company,
man.
right? You're junior, you're a junior employee, like you're rushing around trying to point out everything. Then you end up in management and you have different problems.
Right.
But like, what's the value that's been added?
Chris, when I was documenting process, and then doing Sarbanes-Oxley compliance work and documenting
Yeah,
financial processes, the most fascinating thing to me was getting a group of people in a room, even if they all lived within one facet of a process. But as we
yeah,
start to literally line it out line by line
yeah,
and ask, what's the input? What is that transformation or additive activity? And then how's
yeah,
the output different?
sure.
The number of folks you could always tell who didn't really have a meaningful role in that cycle because they got really queasy and they started
Yeah,
picking and kind of office space like, right? Where they're like, I'm a people person. Yeah.
yeah,
You're not adding anything. So yeah, it's not a discoverable work product.
sure.
And so that's an interesting note.
Well, so here's what's interesting. Here's what's interesting is we feel that so we feel stress in our day to day, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so how we try to fill that is by building that trust, which is through community, which is completely different than work,
Yeah. Good call.
right? And so we have a completely different we intuitively know because we've been around, humans have been around for a long time. We kind of know that, oh shoot, I'm stressed. What I need is a community, right?
Mm,
The problem is sometimes like so that's why it's interesting to think about this whole trust thing is like, okay, if you have trust, right?
yeah.
Uh, if you have trust, then you're fine, right? But trust is finite, meaning, and it's also, we also don't view it well, right? Meaning, the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Where if
Yeah.
the more ignorant you are, the more confident you are, which means you garner more trust.
Right.
Right? And so,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that,
yeah.
someone who doesn't know how to do anything is never messed up in a business. I mean, that's never happened.
No, no, because we never give them sharp knives to run with,
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's interesting. So what you're suggesting is that in newer relationships, we may be putting more trust in people simply because of how they represent themselves
It's a
rather than what
yeah,
they're capable of.
yeah. Like if you think about someone who's very successful, in their role, they're not a manager, but they're a very highly successful IC,
Yeah.
right? Their major frustration oftentimes is that they're sitting in the corner and they're saying, "Hey, check out this problem I found," right? Which is
Yeah.
increasing the stress, right?
Right.
Which doesn't lead to more trust. It actually means that you're less trustworthy
Yeah.
right? And therefore you end up with this really funky you end up with these a lot of these ICs just end up hitting the ceiling and they're like, "What's going on?" And
Yeah.
you're like, "Oh," because ultimately a lot of times the managers they don't want to necessarily expose that inefficiency or that problem because they don't have a place to catch it. There's no home, right? And I think maybe that's part of the problem here is like we seek community to get trust, but then if you take out trust as a variable, then you're left with where's the home and where's the process, and then it's managed by everybody.
Yeah. Which isn't how humans relate to one another very effectively, right? We can
No.
queue up as a tribe, but a bunch of people in a room is neither a tribe nor a community. And oftentimes
Yeah.
that's what the workplace is. It's just a bunch of solo contributors that are
Yeah.
not in any way connected.
Correct. Or you end up with misalignment or misses, right? So like what's interesting is like the solution, I think, is you think about your business from a process standpoint with the apps with basically zero trust, right? So from a process
Um,
stance, you build it from a zero trust standpoint. From a community standpoint, right? That trust side, you
Yeah.
build it with complete and total safety.
Well, the security guys are going to love you for acknowledging a zero trust environment because we've all heard that drum beat. But you know what? Let's explore that more next week.
Yeah, yeah.
As always, the longest 5 minutes of anybody's
Oh,
work week. But yeah, what does a zero trust work environment look
yeah,
like when it's knowledge workers and not from a security, but from a how do you design process so things don't
correct.
fall through the cracks?
And how do you simultaneously build just a kick-ass community,
Ooh,
right? Where nothing drops, right?
yeah,
Everything's caught from a knowledge work standpoint.
yeah,
So you're safe and the system protects you as well.
love it.
All
I'm looking
right.
forward to next week.
All right. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Bye.